And, because we're not in this place right now, there's sometimes celebrations that just can't happen. So, because celebrations can't happen in this room right now, I just want to, reach out digitally. And I'm actually going to make a phone call right now. You guys might, I don't know if you can hear the phone or not. Can you hear the phone ringing? Maybe you can. And she be just noticing now that her phone is ringing and his phone is ringing. See if it's coming. Can you hear me? Maybe they won't even pick up. I didn't tell them I was calling them. Hello, Bobby. Oh, wait, it's the answer machine.
Sorry, hello?
Oh, my goodness. Hey, Bobby, how are you doing?
I'm fine, how are you?
Good. I hear something along the lines. This is day 1 of the 50th year of your marriage.
Yes, it is.
And if you were in the room right now with Bob right now, we would be all clapping and saying, congratulations to Bob for, surviving 50 years. So we just want to really reach out and say happy anniversary to the two of you.
Same thing.
That's awesome. Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I pray your day yesterday was a blessing.
Thank you.
All right, bye for now.
Bye, thanks, Brian.
There you go. Mission number 1 accomplished. It worked. 50 years, can you imagine? Think of the waiting period of 50 years, how long 50 years feels like, and then you begin to think of that whole waiting journey. You think of, you go by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you think of the waiting period that those guys went through. That, God said that he was going to work, and just the waiting journey that they had. And then we have these 400 years that the Israelites were in captivity. So again, we're working through the story right now, and of course, we've worked through creation, and then Abraham, Isaac, and then, of course, Jacob, and then we're landed on Joseph, and then now into the era of Moses, right? And 400 years the Israelites had to kind of wait for God in Egypt and in slavery. And I just can't imagine what 400 years of slavery would feel like, compared to 50 years of marriage. I'm not sure what that would feel like, but, just imagine 400 years, and now they've escaped the slavery, and now they've kind of made their way, and their journey now finds themselves in kind of the desert region of Mount Sinai. And what I want to title this message is Don't Stop on 5. Right? The idea of don't stop on 5. What I mean by that is don't stop on chapter 5. Because sometimes when we read through the Old Testament, we go, wow, I can't believe a God like that would allow things to happen or also cause things like that to happen. And sometimes people, and you've heard it said before, you've heard it said this way, I just can't believe in the God of the Old Testament. Well, I'm here to say that you can believe in the God of the Old Testament, and the God of the Old Testament has been faithful all the way through, just like he's faithful through the life of Jesus, and he's still faithful through your life right now. Don't stop on chapter 5. It kind of reminds me of watching movies. And you guys remember these days, maybe you get a picture up there. Well, let me go back a little bit here. To the idea that week number 1, we worked on these things, the idea that we don't need to live with shame. Of course, we realized that when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, God covered up their shame. And then week number 2, we talked about the idea of that God doesn't want us to stall in our lifestyle. You got that slide there, Paul? Week number 3 talks about the idea of living past disappointment. Living past disappointment. And last week we talked about all bad days are signs that good days are ahead. All bad days are signs that good days are ahead. If you want to open up your story Bibles, we're going to actually read from Exodus chapter 20, and we're going to be reading from the story, and we're going to start reading from page number 60. Page number 60. Page number 60. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourselves an image in the form of anything in heaven, above, or on the earth, beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. For the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses my name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in the 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. I don't know if you guys recognize what we're going through right now, but we're going through the Ten Commandments. And the idea here is that God is laying down some ground rules for these slaves that have been in slavery for 400 years. And he's finally saying, this is the way I want you to live. But the scenario is kind of picturesque, if you may say it that way. They're in Sinai at this point, and Sinai is it's hard to picture, really. So, think to yourself watching a movie. When you watch a movie, you kind of get caught up in the scene and you kind of understand what's going on because the picture's right in front of you. Compare it to, listening to the radio, right? With the radio, you kind of have to picture it, but the movie lays it all out. Speaking of watching movies, I remember watching movies in the 90s. Do you remember this thing? You guys, that were, a little bit older than, 20 might remember this as a VHS tape. Now, for me, particularly, I loved watching a lot of movies as a teenager. And my family, we'd all sit down and watch movies. And the way we'd watch movies, unlike today where you'd sit down and look at Netflix or Disney Plus or Amazon Prime and you begin to, sit there for, half an hour trying to figure out what movie you wanted to watch, from the thousands to select from, you would go to the local convenience store, right? And when you went to the local convenience store, you had a movie in mind and you'd kind of scan the shelves. And what was the worst part of it all is when you're scanning through the movies. Yeah, that's what I kind of looked like back in the day. Yeah, you're scanning through the movies, and you'd finally find the movie you wanted to watch, and what was on that movie was sorry, I'm rented. Right? You know what I'm talking about, right? That little tab and you're kind of shocked. Oh no, that movie's out, so I got to find another movie to watch. And you'd go home, put it in, and you'd start watching that movie, and you're like, wow, this is a bad movie. But what would you do? Even if it was a bad movie, you would do what? You would watch it all the way through the end, because you bought in at that point. You're bought in. And for me, I really want, as we go through chapter 5, for us to stop on chapter 5 and say, I don't quite understand this, so I'm going to stop, right? We need to buy in to the whole principle that God has something planned, something in store. Right? But nowadays you can watch, and this is the problem with our culture today, you can go ahead and start watching a Netflix movie, and all of a sudden, like 2 or 3 minutes into the movie, you're like, I don't want to watch this movie, and you flick to another one, right? You pick another one, and you pick another one, right? Until you finally find the one you want to watch all the way through. And sometimes we do that with the Bible. We say, I'm going to stop on chapter 5, and I'm not going to worry about the rest of it, right? But, think of this as you're sitting in a movie theater, and you're watching the movie, and you're doubtful to get up and walk out of the movie theater because you really want to see it through. My brother was 7 years older than I was, and so sometimes he'd, pick out movies that maybe I shouldn't have been watching. My parents maybe sometimes didn't realize I was watching some of these movies, but my brother would pick out some of these movies. And you guys might know some of these movies, especially around Halloween, these movies like Psycho or The Shining or Exorcist, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, these were movies that I probably shouldn't have been watching, but you know what? Still, lasered into my mind today. And you know what? These were scary, scary movies. And if you were to ask me to draw out, what happened in Nightmare on Elm Street, without having watched the movie, I would have a tough time doing that. Reminds me of this game that our family would often, one of my wife's favorite games is a game called Telestrations. You can see the picture up on the screen. If you haven't played Telestrations before, you might want to check this game out. It's a lot of fun. Reminds you of the old telephone game where you'd whisper a message into someone's ear, and that would kind of, go down the line, and that message would end up changing by the time it got to the end of the line. And, Telestrations is that way. You were asked to paint a vision of a certain scenario, and you would draw that out, and you have a minute to draw it out, and that once that happened, you had to pass that sheet to the next person, and when that sheet was passed to the next person, they would look at it and try to decipher what that was trying to say, and then it was passed to the next person. They would write down what the picture was, and then the next person would look at that statement and try to draw that statement, and then the next person would look at that drawing, and of course it would go 5 or 6 down the line until, of course, it didn't look anything like it, which reminds me of Mount Sinai, right? If I picture Mount Sinai in my mind, I'm thinking to myself maybe a lush mountain. Yesterday we went hiking, down around Sussex, and maybe a mountain like that. But Mount Sinai was nothing like that. If I were to ask you to draw Mount Sinai, what would it look like? And well, here it is up on the screen right now. That's potentially Mount Sinai, or the region where Mount Sinai would have been. Really a desert, mountainous area. If you can picture maybe, Utah, something along those lines, the Grand Canyon. The next picture would kind of give you a little bit of a greater look of the entire region. This is where, the 10 Commandments were given to Moses, right? And, now I think to myself, and what I want to do is I want to begin to read Scripture, and I want you to begin to see or feel what that might have looked like in that time. Again, let's go to page 61. Page 61, right? At the top of page 61, you see these words. So Moses is up on the mountain, this mountain that we're talking about, Mount Sinai. And when the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. And I want you to hold on for that word a little bit. They trembled with fear. So you got to really picture the scenario. I've shown you the mountain, and I want you to draw out in your mind what it would have been like or felt like to tremble with fear. Question is, have you ever really trembled with fear? Right? So they stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you and keep you from sinning." Again, like Telestrations, I want you to begin to draw that out. I want you to begin to draw out another scenario. Go to page 62, right? And sometimes this is where we begin to say, I don't know if I can buy into this. And, again, don't stop on chapter 5, but page 62, bottom of page 62. Moses got up early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in bowls. Now again, I want you to picture this. I want you to, just like Telestrations, begin to draw this out in your mind. Moses took half of the blood and put it in bowls, and the other half he splashed against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. They responded, "We will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey." Now get this, drawing this out. Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Have you pictured this in your mind yet? What would that feel like? What would that look like? Right now, again, there's purpose to there. There's reasoning to this. And, go back to the Old Testament. Because of what Adam and Eve did, something had to pay. Middle of page 63. We'll continue this Telestrations journey. When Moses went up on the mountain, this is again middle of page 63, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountains, and the seventh day the Lord called to Moses within the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Again, I'm asking you to picture this. You know what Mount Sinai looks like. You know what the valley would look like. And again, I'm asking you to picture, what would this look like? Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain and stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Don't stop on chapter 5. We can't comprehend. 4,000 years out from this, we living in North America, when we try to picture these scenarios, when we try to picture this, and again, you can understand when people say, I just don't understand the God of the Old Testament. I don't understand how that, because we haven't pictured it. We don't understand. We can't comprehend it. Think of COVID right now and the 59 million cases of COVID worldwide. I can't comprehend that number. I can't comprehend 59 million cases. Especially in New Brunswick, where we're dealing with, again, yesterday in St. John, thankfully 0 cases, and 3 or so in Fredericton. And again, what are we up to? 125 cases in all of New Brunswick. And we're in this orange phase, but I can't comprehend the impact that COVID is having worldwide. And the reason that we're in this orange phase and the reason that we're being protected is because we understand that Jennifer Russell understands the impact that COVID can have because we've seen it around the world, but because we're in New Brunswick, we can't comprehend it. We can't understand it, what's happening around the world. And here Moses is. He's been up on the mountain for 6 weeks. And the scripture that I read at the start were the 10 commandments that I read through. 6 weeks Moses is up on the mountain getting these 10 commandments, getting these 10 commandments, and he brings them down. But again, that whole scenario, I just don't understand. Why the blood? Why the chaos? Why all of this stuff? Right? 6 weeks, the Israelites are waiting and nothing. They don't hear nothing. They just see what's going on the mountain in 6 weeks. And so the 6-week journey happens. And so I want to begin reading as we work through this. Page 64. And 6 weeks, think about this. Now, think about this 6 weeks compared to what Abraham had to go through. Compare these 6 weeks what Jacob had to go through. Compare these 6 weeks to the 400 years that the Israelites had to wait for God in Egypt. 6 weeks, they're waiting and nothing. Man, think about how easy it is for us to, kind of lose faith in 6 weeks. You think the Israelites, 6 weeks would be nothing compared to the 400 years, but they lose it anyways. And we see them lose their faith in God. And they build a golden calf. When the people saw that Moses was so long, again, 6 weeks, so long compared to the 400 years, that doesn't seem very long, but Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, this is the guy that brought you out of slavery in Egypt. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron answered them, "Take off your gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me." So that all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol. It cast it in the shape of a calf and fashioned it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." See, we might, in North America, begin to understand this dilemma that the Israelites are going through. Compared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See, when you read through Abraham, and when I read that, I said, man, I couldn't believe waiting 40 years. I couldn't believe waiting the 400 years for God to speak. And for us as North Americans, we think, man, I haven't heard God this week. So maybe he doesn't exist. I haven't heard God in 6 weeks is what the Israelites saying. But here's the similarity between us and the Israelites. See, when the Israelites were in Egypt for 400 years, you know what they did every single day? They busied themselves. Now, it wasn't intentional. They busied themselves because they were slaves. Every day they had to work. Doesn't that sound like today? That we're slaves to our jobs, we're slaves to our work environments, we're slaves to busyness. And they needed to busy themselves. Here they are, after 400 years in slavery, they're sitting at the bottom of the mountain with nothing to do, right? So they got to figure out what to do. If I was sitting around for 6 weeks nowadays, I'd probably try to figure out what to do too. If I'm not hearing from God, I'm going to try to make some things up. That's what the Israelites do. And that's what they did on page 64. And I'm going to keep reading here. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So the next day, the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterwards, they sat down to eat and drink and got to indulge in revelry. And you can just picture the scenario again. These guys are partying it up. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it, and have said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you out of Egypt.' I have seen these people," the Lord said to Moses, "and they are stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them, and I may destroy them. Then I'll make you into a great nation." Stiff-necked. I remember the pre-MacBook days, back in the old PC days. Yeah, for some of us, you're still there. And sometimes you get frustrated with your computer, and the computer wasn't working, it was slowed down. What would you do if the computer slowed down to such a crawl that you were like, "Man, I'm done with this computer. Like, I'm going to either throw it out or I'm going to wipe the hard drive." Right? I'm going to format everything. And you know what? There's going to be files on that computer, and I don't really care if I lose the files. There's going to be pictures on it. I just need to speed things up here. And I think maybe that's what God is going through right now. He's like, I just got to format everything. I got to reboot, and I got to just make Moses. I'm going to leave Moses, and he's going to be in charge. But you know what? Moses, he steps up for the people. And here's the important part. Top of chapter, or page 65. "But Moses sought the favor of the Lord, his God. 'Lord,' he said, 'why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it was with an evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth?'" God goes on to use the word stiff-necked again. And really, as I looked into the word stiff-necked people, we might even use that today in this culture to explain. It's kind of a figure of speech, but the phrase evokes an image of unsubmissiveness, of being defiant, of being like a stubborn animal that will not accept the yoke of the master in order to work the land. See, it's either being hardness or of a heart or dullness of heart. It's regularly expressed in a number of equivalent phrases. Like, think of, well, I don't want to get too much into it. Yeah, we won't push any naming names here, but, you could think of some stiff-necked people in your own life, right? And God wanted to destroy them in page 65. They were down, drunk and partying after only 6 weeks of this waiting period. And God comes down in the middle of page 65. When Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to them, "There is a sound of war in the camp." And Moses replied, "It's not the sound of victory. It's not the sound of defeat. It's the sound of singing that I hear." You know what? And these Israelites, they've just totally forgotten about God, and they've gone this one direction of worshiping a calf. 6 weeks of waiting, and they turn their backs to God. And they, adultery. It's what they find themselves in. And you know what? I don't blame them. 6 weeks in today's culture, that's a long time. And so Moses does this one thing. And this is where I want to kind of get to the point here. In church, it's been since March that we've been normal. COVID has caused us in this situation where, and I think some people have maybe, I wouldn't say turn their back on God in this journey, but it's a long journey for a lot of us. And some of us have stopped on chapter 5. And what I mean by that was we've stopped and we said they begin to find other ways of worshiping God. And Moses saw that the people were running wild at the top of page 66. And Aaron had let them get out of control, and so became a laughing stock of their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said these important words: "Who is for the Lord? Come to me. Who is for the Lord? Come to me." In Hebrew, that would have sounded like this: Mi Yahweh la el-e. Mi Yahweh la el-e. The next paragraph is where I kind of got picturing things, and I began to think about this whole telestrations thing. And I began to think, what would this have looked like? Again, don't stop on chapter 5. Then he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says." When everybody approached, all the Levites approached Moses, this is what Moses instructed them to do. "Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor." Now, don't stop on chapter 5, but begin to picture this in your mind. What would this have looked like? I'll read it again. "Each man strap a sword to his side." Now, what I'm picturing, if I were to picture, and I would draw this out in illustrations, I'm picturing strapping with duct tape, getting some duct tape out with my sword, and strapping this sword around my waist, and it's sticking out like this. And I picture myself, and it says, next thing, "Go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor." And I picture this. And I picture running around the camp with all kinds of swords sticking out of people. And I'm like, God, what is this? And so that's where we begin to look a little bit further. God originally says to Moses, "I want you to destroy everybody." And Moses is like, no, wait, God, wait. Hold up a little bit. There's got to be another way. And so what's going on here? The Levites approach Moses, and he says, "Hey, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go throughout the entire camp, and I need you to find the people that are stuck in Egyptian ways. I need you to find the people that are still wanting to head back to Egypt and like that lifestyle. They like the busy lifestyle. They like the style of where they didn't really have a God, that their God was Pharaoh, and their God was busyness. I want you to go throughout the camp, and I want you to ask this one question. This question is this. Again, Mi Yahweh la ele. Are you for God or not? And unfortunately, I don't understand it. But if you weren't for God, you had to die. And that's what happened. The Levites went throughout the entire camp, and I'm not sugarcoating it at all. They had to kill off everybody that didn't believe. 4,000 years ago, this is what happened. We were like, man, I can't picture that. Just like I can't picture 86 million COVID cases throughout all of the world in New Brunswick, I can't picture why this would have happened, what this would have. But you know what? You go to other parts of the world, and this is kind of normal. What they did in killing friends and family members must have been agonizingly difficult for most of them. But it was faithful to God's will, and therefore earned them his blessing. And see, because they were able to filter out those that didn't believe and were never going to believe, they were able to change the culture. However, tentatively, they were able to free themselves of idolatry. And Yahweh was, once again, Israel's sole focus of worship. Again, the question is, whoever is for the Lord. The one illustration I can think of as I close up is this story of World War II, and there was a church that was gathering underground, and enemy soldiers had raided this underground church and said, listen, we're going to kill everybody that fully believes that they're here and they totally believe in Jesus. And when that happened, there was people that got up and left. They, it's not worth dying. This whole faith thing isn't worth dying. And so those people left, and the people that were totally sold out to Jesus stuck around. And the soldiers, with guns in hand, looked at each person that stuck around. They said, so you fully are sold out to Jesus, right? And they're like, yeah, we are. And then soldiers sat down with them and said, okay, let's worship, because we can't worship with non-believers because of fear that we would have them turn their backs on us and tell on us because of our faith in Jesus. So those stories like that is just such, in this situation here, they're trying to filter it out so that everybody has a solid faith in Jesus. What would a church look like where everybody was fully sold out the same way? That whoever's for the Lord. The one thing that comes to my mind is a church that is on fire for Jesus. Like the mountain of Sinai was on fire when Moses was up there. I can't picture it, but I would love to see it. A church that's on fire for Jesus. What would a church look like that worship in the building was just packed and the church just rumbled like the noise that was coming out of Sinai, that the building just trembled, and that the enemy trembled with fear because everybody was sold out to Jesus. Whoever is for the Lord. And that the enemy trembled. When Jesus died on the cross, there's something that I still can't picture. A scenario happened when Jesus died on the cross, when he says, it is finished, and he gave up his spirit. It says these words, that the earth quaked, and that the veil was torn in two, and that, if you want to go ahead and read a little bit later, that the tombs opened up, and that the dead came to life. What would that look like? I don't know. But what I do know is that Christ is powerful enough to make it happen. As you read through chapter 5 this week, there are going to be some scenarios that you're going to go, wow, I just can't picture that. I just don't understand it. But in the end, the important words are this: are you for the Lord? That's what Moses asks. Whoever is for the Lord, come to me. Don't stop on chapter 5. Let's pray. Father, thank you for chapter 5. Thank you for what it offers us. Thank you for a glimpse into the difficulties of even being who you are. I can't imagine the decisions that you would have to make and the systems that you had to put in place. And I can't even picture what chapter 5 would look like sometimes. But I'm not going to stop on chapter 5. And as a faithful follower of Jesus, I'm going to keep reading the next 25 chapters because I know that the story leads to Christ. I know that the story leads to a person that came down to earth, even as Advent comes into place, came down to earth as a baby boy to shake the foundations of the enemy, to make him tremble. And so, God, as a church, we want to do that. We want to be each bought into the idea that, we are for you. We want to speak those words, Father. Mi Yahweh la Ele, that whoever is for the Lord. So, God, help us read through chapter 5 with an open mindset, an open understanding that there are some difficult things in there, but there's a lot better to come in the next 25 chapters. Thank you, Jesus. In your name I pray. Amen. You know, what would it look like for a church to be totally on fire? And I think, you know, I think Share Word and I think the Gideons have a good start at that, to helping churches get on fire, to help churches break down the foundation that the devil has set up, to break fear that each of us have in expressing our love for Jesus to others, to our neighbors, to our coworkers, to our family. So I'm just going to allow Steve and Wayne an opportunity to share where Share Word is at on that journey. And so, Steve and Wayne, you guys have this time to do so, and then I will close off with